Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice 10-game slate for baseball. Should be a pretty windy day in some of these places that are outside, and it looks like the weather is going to be clear for all the games, so that's good. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Just to get it out of the way, the core plays are Roddy Tellez, Willie Adames, Hop, and then Winker on FanDuel or on DraftKings, and on FanDuel, Tellez, Adames, Hop, and Mullins. So with that said, let's get into our pitchers. We're going to start with an interesting option here in Kodai Senga. He's played really well in Japan, but this is his first stint in Major League Baseballs. He is one of the more expensive players here on on DraftKings, so he is viable here, but he's risky. But the advantage here is that there's no really like ace pitchers playing today, so that gives him some advantage where you can take a little bit more of a risk. But he's going to be high risk, high reward simply because it's his first game. But he was really good in Japan, so I expect him to have some good ability here. We'll have to wait and see how he does obviously here, but he looks like an interesting option on the slate. Just high risk, high reward. Then we're going to look at Joe Ryan. Now, he played 4 games against Kansas City last season, and his worst game in those games were 19 fantasy points. I think he's a great option on the slate. He averaged 26 fantasy points against them last year. He had 26 strikeouts in those games as well. He's one of the better strikeout pitchers on the slate, so I think he's definitely a top-tier play. I think he's probably my favorite pitching option on the slate as far as, historical data and stuff like that and just being quality. Then we're looking at Jeffrey Springs. Now he's got the best total runs against him perspective on this one. He doesn't have the strikeout potential that some of the other guys have, but he does have some decent strikeouts. He's still pretty good, and he's got a good matchup here against Detroit, who doesn't really have any lefties, which is his kryptonite, and so I definitely think he's viable on the slate. Luis Garcia is a good alternative to him, where their metrics are virtually identical. The only difference is Luis Garcia tends to pitch a little bit deeper in the game, but Springs is a little bit cheaper. But and Garcia is going to also face a few more lefties today than Springs will. So I do think Springs is a better option, but Garcia is a good alternative to him. And then Chris Bassett for Toronto. He's got a tough matchup against St. Louis. But he is one of the better pitchers on the slate, and he's definitely worth a look here. He definitely has some good upside, and he can get some strikeouts occasionally, so he is an interesting play. He's a little bit riskier, though, than some of the other guys, and he didn't finish last season very well, but you can see that he started last season in a pretty good space. So while he is a pretty risky option, he's just a good alternative to some of the other guys I mentioned. And I have one more dude to mention here, and that's Schuster for Atlanta. Now, this is going to be his first career start, it looks like. And while he didn't play great in the minor leagues, he had a 3.29 ERA. I mean, that's not bad or anything, but it's not great. He actually earned his rotation spot due to his spring training, where he was really dominant in 18 innings. He's super high risk, super high reward potentially. He does appear to have decent stuff, so we'll have to wait and see on him. But I do think he's got some utility and a good matchup against the Washington Nationals, who are just completely terrible. But he is very risky. But he is a lefty too, which definitely gives him some weird advantage here, I think. So we'll have to wait and see, obviously how he starts in his first game. But he's a very cheap option if you want to pay up more for other guys. But I will say that honestly, you don't have all that much risk today when it comes to paying up, simply because there's a lot of good value plays on the slate, including the Milwaukee-Chicago game, which I like quite a bit. So let's go ahead and get started at the catchers, and we're going to start with Adley Rutschman. He started the season really strong. He is priced up, though, which does make him a little bit harder to roster today, but there's value everywhere, so he's somebody to consider, and he's definitely a viable option on the slate. Then Yan Gomez from Chicago Cubs. He's very cheap here, and he's got home run potential in this game. He's got some weird upside in this one, and this park looks like it's going to have wind in a way that's really going to benefit both these teams. So he's definitely somebody to consider on the slate. He's a good value play. And then a good alternative to those two is Tyler Stevenson in Cincinnati. He's also in a great matchup. He started the season pretty well, and he's got a good matchup here at home. So he also hits the ball really well, which is what I like from a catcher. Then we're going to look at first base here, and Rowdy Tellez. He's a core play here. Anytime that he kind of pops up in my radar, he's a home run guy. He's a kind of a boomer bust home run guy, but he's just too cheap here for his potential. I really like him a lot in this situation, and I think he's got a home run coming in this game. So you can mark that down as a home run call if you want. A good alternative to him is Pete Alonso. Obviously, he's very expensive, so he's harder to roster, but he is available and he's a good option today. He's played well so far, so I look for him to play and hit potentially another home run. Then we're going to look at Matt Olson, who's a good alternative as well. He started the season extremely well, and so I look for him to continue to build on that. He's got a nice matchup here against Washington again, obviously, which gives him some good upside. Then we'll look at second base, and we got a lot of good options at second base, which usually is hard spot to follow to figure out guys in. But Nico Hornier for Chicago, he played really well last season. He had some good games against Milwaukee. I expect him to have a good game here. The ball should be flying in this matchup, so I think he's a great option on the slate. He also hits the ball really well. Then we'll look at Jonathan India for Cincinnati. Now he's priced up, which is makes him a little bit unappealing, but he's got a good matchup here, and he's got some potential just due to the fact that they're at home. I do like Ozzie Albies a little bit better simply because he's a little bit cheaper than India, but he's got some good upside here. He's not really a home run hitter necessarily, but he's got some potential in this game against a team who he just absolutely crushes most of the time, and so he's got a nice option. He's a nice option on the slate. And then Luis Urias, he's a nice value option here. He's risky because he's going against a new pitcher in Major League Baseball from Japan, but he's got a good opportunity here to have a good game. He started the season pretty well as well, and I really do like his opportunity in this matchup as a value play and a way to kind of save some money at second base if you want to. But second base is very good today. Then at third base, we're going to start with Patrick Wisdom, who I obviously like at either third base or outfield. He's got some good opportunity here. He's priced fair. He's got a great option. He's a great option today. He's got home run potential. His batting average isn't the best, but he does he does hit long balls, and this is a game where that's definitely going to be something that will probably happen quite a bit. Yandy Diaz is a good alternative to him. Almost the same price. He's a little bit less ideal, but he does hit the ball better, like just batting average wise, and so he's definitely got some utility in this matchup. Austin Riley's kind of the expensive option. If you can afford him, he's definitely somebody to consider in a nice plus matchup against Washington, and he's played extremely well in the games against Washington last season. He had 8 home runs against them, and he hit one yesterday. I think he hit something yesterday as well. He hit a couple hits this year so far, sorry, and he's definitely viable on the slate. So I think he's in a great spot in this matchup. Then we are going to look at Jose Miranda for Minnesota. He's just a value play. He's a kind of a Hail Mary play on the slate. He's a boomer bust option, and he's a great situation to potentially have a good game. Then we'll look at Willie Adames for Milwaukee. He's in a really good spot. I really do like when he rises to the top of my projections, and he looks like he's in a great spot. And his price isn't like way too high, which is nice as well. So anytime he fits in this category, he's a good home run hitter. He's got a great matchup and in a park where it looks like the balls are gonna flow. Obviously, if you want to take a look at O'Neal Cruz, he's definitely somebody to consider. He has big home run potential. But it's not super ideal, but he's better against Cincinnati when they're at Cincinnati, and so he's definitely worth looking at, but he's pretty expensive. And then Gunnar Henderson's kind of a Hail Mary boomer bust play on the slate. He's cheaper than the 2 other guys. If you can't afford Adames, he's probably the best option to really go with. In the outfield, we have quite a few options, and we're going to start with Jordan Alvarez, who just has big-time potential. He's very expensive, but he has got good upside here, and I think he's viable on the slate. Kyle Tucker, also very interesting for Houston. Either one of these guys are likely to hit a home run today. We'll just have to wait and see which one does, but they both have big time potential in a plus matchup. Ronald Acuna, I really do like him as well against Gore, who he should be able to dominate. He's mashed on Washington himself and in the past, and I expect him to continue that. He had a home run yesterday. Looks like he's in another good spot to have a good game. Then we're going to look at Christian Yelich for Milwaukee. I really do think he's a good, cheaper option on the slate. It's hard to find a lot of good cheap options in the outfield on the slate, but he's one of them. He's got home run potential, and he's hopefully going to start the season off a little bit better than he did last year. Then we'll look at Byron Buxton. He's expensive play, but he's definitely viable on the slate. I do probably like Acuna a little bit better, but he's got some good upside, and he started the season extremely well with some really good hits. So I think he's in a really good spot to have a great game, especially since he hadn't hit a home run yet. Then we'll look at Aaron Judge, who's just a home run machine. And while I don't necessarily think he's going to be particularly great on days where he doesn't hit a home run, he definitely has some big time potential in this matchup. He's got a good matchup for another home run, and of course, being at home is definitely a bonus as well. So, typically, at least from a home run perspective, so we'll have to wait and see on him. But I think he is a good option on the slate. I got some value plays here in Jesse Winker, who I think is a core play. He's got some good upside in this matchup, and he's just too cheap for his potential, though. He's borderline boomer bust, but he's just so cheap that he's definitely capable of being rostered and helping you out. TJ Friedl is kind of a boomer bust option today. He looks like he's got home run potential in this matchup, but he's high risk, high reward. Same with Jake Fraley, who I do like, but he's a little bit more expensive than I really want to pay for him. But he's somebody that can hit a home run and has some good potential at home, so he's definitely viable. Ian Happ is obviously a guy I really like a lot today. I think he's going to hit a home run, and that's why he's in my core plays. He just feels like a guy. Anytime I get a feeling about him, I tend to really like to use him. And then Trey Mancini, he's a good alternative as well option here. He's played extremely well off and on as home run hitter, and in certain matchups he does manage to hit home runs, and he's got a new team again, so I think he's in a good spot. Obviously, he's not the best hitter, but, we're more looking for home run potential when it comes to Hail Mary play like him. So, with that said, guys, that's what I have for DraftKings. Let's move over to FanDuel, and I will kind of go through these a little bit faster because mostly talked about most of the players already. For my pitching perspective, Joe Ryan is obviously the top option. He's played extremely well against Kansas City in the past, and I look for him to have a really solid game here. He's the best pitching option on the slate. Jeffrey Springs also has some good utility here. Now, he's a little bit more expensive than Luis Garcia, who I actually like a little bit better on FanDuel, simply because they're very close to being the same. But Garcia tends to play a little bit deeper into games than Springs does, and on DraftKings, Springs is quite a bit cheaper, so it makes him more viable, whereas on FanDuel, Garcia is a lot cheaper. So I think Garcia is the better play on this slate. And then obviously Kodai Senga, sorry if I'm butchering your name, but he's going to be the starter for the Mets, and he's in a high-risk, high-reward situation, but you could definitely take a gamble on him. But he's a little bit risky, especially here on FanDuel where you only use one pitcher. So then we're going to get our first catchers and first baseman, and Rowdy Tilley is obviously a core play. He just feels like a home run in the making on the slate, and I think he's a great spot. I also like Pete Alonso, who's got some good upside in this matchup, and he's had a really good start to the season. I expect him to continue that, and he just looks like a viable option here. And then Matt Olson for Atlanta. He also looks very interesting. He's had some big games so far this season. He's got some really good opportunity. He's also priced pretty fair, and so he's definitely worth taking a look. And then Trey Mancini. He's a good value play, kind of almost a Hail Mary option, but he's got home run potential in this matchup. So I definitely think he's somebody worth taking a look at. Then at second base, Nico Horner, I really do like him today. I think he's got good potential in this matchup. He's just too cheap for his potential. But because second base is so good, I can't make him a core play, especially with Albies, who's in a really good spot. He's a little bit more expensive, but he's definitely viable on the slate. Definitely worth taking a look at him and see what you think about his potential in this game. I think he's got some good potential. Jonathan India is also a pretty good option, though he's a little bit more expensive than Horner. I think he has some utility in this matchup. And then Arraez for Miami is high risk, high reward situation, but as a value play. But he's about the same price as Horner, so I think Horner is probably better. But if you want an alternative, he's a great one to look at. At third base, we're going to start with Austin Riley, who is a little bit risky today because he hasn't. Sorry, not risky. What am I saying? That was for another player. Sorry, I skipped down an extra run. For Austin Riley, I think he's in a really good spot today. While he hasn't had super great games so far, he has been walked a few times, and he had scored a run yesterday and got a hit. So I expect him to continue to look for home run potential, and he's got a nice plus matchup here. Patrick Wisdom is a good alternative value play here. He's very cheap, and so he definitely has some nice utility in this matchup against Milwaukee, and he's got big time upside in this matchup. I feel like a home run potential from him is really high. And then another good alternative is Alex Bregman, who I don't love today, but I do think he's rosterable. He's priced pretty fair, and he's got some utility here, though he hasn't started the season particularly well. As for shortstop, I really like Willie Adames, and I almost said don't even talk about anybody else at this position, simply because I think he's going to hit a home run today. But he is, you got to take a look at some other guys as well. And O'Neal Cruz is cheap enough here on FanDuel to definitely take in consideration, and he started the season really well for Pittsburgh. And while he won't keep the batting average, he will get the home runs because he hits the ball so hard. Carlos Correa also very interesting today because he's pretty cheap here on FanDuel, and while he hasn't started the season off particularly great, he's got some utility in this matchup. Then for the outfielders, obviously I have Ian Happ as a core play, and that's simply because I think he's going to hit another home run today. He started the season really well, and he's just too cheap for his potential. And then Cedric Mullins, who really, he's here mostly because he's still in the ball well, still in the base well, and Baltimore is just, they're throwing steals every other turn. So as long as they continue to do that, he's definitely going to be in play at this price. He also gets walked a decent amount, so he definitely has some utility, and he's got home run potential. So he just has all the positives, and he's just too cheap here on DraftKings, or on FanDuel rather. He's pretty expensive on DraftKings, hard to roster there, but over here he's in a great spot. We're also going to mention Acuna. He's in a great spot here for Atlanta against Washington. He hit a home run yesterday. He looks like another spot prime to do something. Jordan Alvarez is playing pretty solid so far this season. He's had 3 straight games over 18 fantasy points. I look for that to continue here. He's got a good matchup against the Chicago White Sox, and so I look for him to be a great option. Kyle Tucker also playing well so far. He had a home run in one of the games. Now he's a little bit riskier than Alvarez, but he's definitely got the potential here, and so he's definitely worth taking a look. I also like Byron Buxton a lot, despite the fact that he hadn't hit a home run yet. He's got some really good utility and potential here. He's also a little bit cheaper, which is nice on the slate, and makes him very rosterable. Then we'll look at Aaron Judge. Now, Aaron Judge is big boom. He's a big boom guy, so I do think he has home run potential, but he's the most expensive option on the slate, and so he's definitely worth taking a look at because of the home runs that he'll likely hit this season. Jesse Winkler feels like a good value play today. He's just too cheap for his potential here. He's got big time upside sometimes. He does hit home runs occasionally, and I definitely think he's got some utility. He's a little risky, but I do think he's worth rostering. Let's see here, I already talked about him. Jake Fraley is a kind of a Hail Mary option, high risk, high reward. He started the game pretty well, season so well though, with a home run yesterday. But he is kind of a boomer bust option. Christian Yelich also very interesting here for Milwaukee. He's actually not started the season terrible, but his price is cheap enough where he's definitely viable on the slate. Definitely worth taking a look at, and he's got home run potential in this one. Then, last but not least, TJ Friedel. He's just another value, kind of a Hail Mary play. High risk, high reward. He hasn't really done much yet, but if he starts in the top couple spots in the lineup, he's definitely worth taking a look. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.